So I'm curious if anyone else like me just did nothing over the last 2 weeks but watch Olympics. Was anyone else, or am I alone in this? Oh, I'm so sad. Okay, Easter's got me. Oh my God. It was like, all right, I'm going to watch the big stuff, right? I'm going to watch gymnastics. I'm going to watch soccer. But then I'm like, okay, let me randomly take 2 hours and become an expert in archery all of a sudden, even though I didn't know anything about archery beforehand, right? So I was on a big time Olympics binge over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that really struck me was how many of these folks, as they were kind of telling the stories of all of the different athletes, had stories around having a vision board or having made a prediction when they were a kid that this was going to be their dream, or of having journaled about what they wanted to see happen. So I have tons of examples of this. Ooh, creative visions, that's where we're at. This is Michael Phelps. I would like to make the Olympics. He wrote this when he was 8 years old. You can see, I would like to make junior Olympics in at least one event. So he was tempering himself a little bit to then go on to be like the greatest swimmer ever, besides Katie Ledecky. We have, this is Anna Hall. I had never heard of her before. She's a heptathlete, which is like the best of the best athletes because they have to be able to run fast and jump high and jump far and do like literally 7 different events. And there were news stories about how she was reviewing all of these journal entries that she wrote on the day that she qualified for the Olympics. And you can see the way she's talking to herself, right? I can, I will, I must. Today I will become an Olympian. And reviewing this as she's then going on to compete in the Olympics and have great success. For the women's soccer fans, Mallory Pugh Swanson, 6th grade yearbook. I want to be on the USA soccer team and win a gold medal. That happened this year, right? The US women's team won the gold medal. Very, very exciting. And then I have some pictures of Simone Biles and Katie Ledecky with vision boards and sharing that they use this as kind of a tool to motivate themselves. And not to put myself anywhere in the realm of these folks, but I've given a talk in the past where I mentioned that my senior year of high school, I wrote at the top of every single page of my planner in like May or in April, what are you doing today to become a national champion? Because that was my goal. I did not reach that goal. That's a story for another time, but I got a lot closer than I would have if I wouldn't have really had that vision kind of guiding me. And there is actually some science behind it. So some of this can feel a little bit like, ooh, let me manifest it, right? And I'm like, we can be a little bit skeptical of that. But Dr. Alan Chu, who is a sports psychologist, talks about how the act of really clearly visioning something in your mind strengthens the brain pathways, strengthens the neural networks that actually allow you to then physically perform that action even better. It's this concept called functional equivalence, where if you are picturing something really crystal clear in your mind, actions that you're in control of, right? A routine that you're going to go through, a speech that you're going to give, and really honing in on imagining that as clearly as possible, it helps your brain then be able to go and actually deliver on doing that. And there was another cool example of this in the Olympics. This is my dude. This is the pommel horse guy. If you were even on TikTok, I hope you even heard of this dude. He had one job. He was like, I'm really good at the pommel horse. I'm going to help the men win a bronze medal in gymnastics. But there are literally videos, and I wasn't tech savvy enough to get it as a video. But in this top one, he's like standing on the floor, like imagining the moves in his head, and he looks like an idiot, right? He looks very silly, kind of like doing the mental practice of like, okay, then I spin this way and do this hand this way. But that prepared him when the moment comes and all the spotlight is on you and all the pressure was on, right? He was the last person to go, to be able to execute the routine flawlessly. And there is like a brain basis for that to be true. So clearly, having the vision isn't enough to win an Olympic medal. I think we all know that. I'm sorry to break any dreams if we didn't already know that. All of these athletes had to make a lot of investments, right? They obviously had to invest their time. They obviously invested a lot of emotional energy, but they also invested a lot of money. And that doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot, right? They had to pay for time to practice in their facilities, right? You don't just have free access to a pool all the time. They had to pay their coaches. They had to pay to travel around the country and the world to compete in all of these competitions that were going to prepare them to compete at the highest level when it did come time to the Olympics. So are we sensing some parallels here, right? Maybe there's some investments that we make along our speech journey. I'll put that out there. But they were also guided by that vision. right? So they knew that those investments were worth it to them because they were pursuing the dream or the vision. And now it's totally possible that your goals aren't as clear as that. So like in my 6th grade yearbook, I didn't know what a keynote speaker was, right? I wasn't writing down that I wanted to be a keynote speaker in my 6th grade yearbook. And they don't even have to be as grand as, okay, I'm going to be in the Olympics, or even I'm going to be, go to nationals in speech or debate. It doesn't have to be that serious or that big necessarily. But taking the time to just think about and to dream a little bit, it can be really important no matter what the goal is. So there's a process I like to use from this brand called Passion Planner that I'm like addicted to. And this is for free online. So if you go to passionplanner.com, you can download this for free. All you have to do is give your email address. So that's a little bit of an exchange. But what it asks you to do, and the founder is a woman named Angelia Trinidad, and she came up with this idea of kind of the passion roadmap. And the first thing that you do, I'm gonna come over here, is on this first page, you set a timer, because you limit yourself to a little bit of time, and you make a wish list. And it's if I could be anything, do anything, or have anything, what would it be? And then there's these timelines, lifetime, 3 years, 3 months, 1 year. And you just set a timer and you just let yourself go, right? And you're not committing to anything in that moment. You're just kind of seeing what comes up for those 5 minutes. And I think that's a really powerful practice that sometimes we skip over, right? Sometimes we don't have the courage to dream and to imagine like, oh, what cool thing could I do in the next 3 years? I will also note the second page, she asks you to choose one of those goals, and she calls it your game changer goal. Like, which of these goals would make the most positive impact in my life? And then you have to go through the process of deciding and mapping out, okay, what are all those little baby steps towards getting there? But it starts with that process of just giving yourself literally as little as 5 minutes to dream and to start with a dream. Okay, so that is the first step. If we want to make courageous choices, we need to know what we're moving towards. We need to know what we value. If you want your GPS to work, you have to put in your end destination. Otherwise, it won't know where to take you, right? So creating the vision is the first step. Second step, I have so many transitions here, is defining the decision. It's really important to start to understand and recognize when we have a choice in front of us. So there's a lot in our lives, in our speech journeys, that we can't control, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk. Some might even say our speech journeys are like a roller coaster. That's an inside joke, because I sometimes talk about roller coasters. But it's important for us to be able to realize and recognize what choices we have in front of us. So it can be tempting to think about life and decision making, or maybe you haven't thought about this, but as a game of chess. So if I just sit and think hard enough and I map out where all the pieces go and I make my very defined plan, then I'm going to be able to get there. And people who are really good at chess, they can do this. So I actually debated in high school against a guy that I'm still friends with today. He went to a dyno, but we don't hold that against him. And he can play a game of chess backwards and blindfolded and win. And just like here, it's like, okay, I moved this piece to this square, and there's like numbers for the squares. And it's insane, right? So people who are really good at chess, they don't even need to look at the board. They can see like 5 moves ahead. They know the strategy based on, okay, if my opponent does this, then I'm going to do this. Is anyone here really good at chess? Okay, me neither. And so it can be tempting to think like, okay, if I just map everything out perfectly in my head, we're going to get to that end goal. That ignores the uncertainty and the risk, right? So there's a decision-making expert who I think is really cool. Her name is Annie Duke. And in part, she's a decision-making expert because she has a PhD in some sort of psychology, I think from Columbia. So she's very, very smart. But in part, because she's a professional poker player. And when you play poker, you are having to make game time decisions with money on the line. Like, she estimates like 70 decisions per hand of poker. And she makes the argument that poker is actually a lot better metaphor when we think about life, because there are so many variables that we can't control or that we know nothing about, right? The cards in our opponent's hands, the cards that the dealer is going to flip. I don't really play poker either, so I would probably use the terminology wrong. But there's a lot more that we can't control and that we have to make decisions even with the absence of that information. And so she uses the phrase thinking in bets That's actually the name of her book, where rather than saying, okay, here's the certain outcome that I can count on if I go down this road, it's like, okay, there's an 80-20 chance that that'll work out for me. Or it's 50-50, but I care about it, so I'm gonna go for it, right? So it gets rid of this lens of kind of all or nothing thinking and allows us to account a little bit for the things that we can't control, the things that we aren't able to predict. And when we think about kind of the process, I'll hide her, of decision making, we can't define a courageous choice based on the outcome, because we have to have already made the decision before we knew what the outcome would be, right? So for our debaters, I'm throwing out a Kierkegaard quote here, which is that life has to be lived forwards, but it can only be understood backwards, right? So we're never going to know what the outcome is going to be before we make the choice. And that's why we have to kind of take probability into account and take this uncertainty into account as well. And now sometimes we have choices to make that are very clear, right? We have to make our class schedule, and there's a deadline for that, and someone's waiting to hear on it. You will get to the point where you will be offered a job, and there will be a deadline, and they'll say, okay, you got to decide by this day if this is the job that you want to take. Those decisions are very clear. But the reason that I say that we need to work on defining our decisions is that a lot of the time, it's kind of up to us. A little bit more like Yantan's situation, where it's like, I could just procrastinate, and like you're not consciously deciding I will or I won't get my permit, but you're just kind of like stepping back so you don't really have to make the choice. And I don't mean to put you on blast for that. That's totally valid. And it's something that happens to all of us, right? Where we don't consciously think, okay, this is a choice in front of me, so we kind of just take a passive approach and kind of wait to see what will happen instead of being really intentional about it. Right, so not choosing can be a way of not having to make a choice. Like, oh, I missed the deadline, I guess I'm not doing that thing. Or like, oh, I never filled out that form. Oops, like, guess that's not happening. Or like, I am so tired today, I'm not gonna go to that tryout because I probably won't do well and maybe I won't make it anyway, right? And that's robbing ourselves of the ability to make that choice consciously. Sometimes we gotta be like, okay, I'm tired, but I know future Michelle is gonna regret it if I don't go to this tryout, because that means I can't do this activity all year, right? And kind of thinking ahead to that future self can be a way to jerk us out of that. So sometimes it's kind of on us to define the decision for ourselves and really frame it as a choice, right? I'm choosing to try out for this team even though I'm tired, because I will regret it if I don't. I'm choosing to get up and speak, even if it's not perfect, because I know that that'll be a step towards what my ultimate goal is. I'm choosing to show up on this Zoom call and also maybe cry, because I know that that will be a step towards what I'm after, what I want. And then kind of my last note on this defining the decision is that, again, there's a lot out of our control. There's a lot of uncertainty and risk. We can also make a choice about our attitudes, right? So even when everything else is out of our hands, we can make choices about how we respond to things. So we can't control a random speech judge who gives us a random rank that we're really not happy with, that's not consistent with our goal or our vision or what we want for ourselves. But we can choose whether we let that affect how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about the stories that we're choosing to tell to our audiences. And so even in moments where it doesn't feel like there's a choice, I think it's worth taking that pause and saying, okay, is there something I can be choosing in this moment? Is it what I want to be choosing? Okay. Even sometimes I'm like scrolling Instagram and it's like, oh, I'm choosing to scroll Instagram right now. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like I'm sucked in, but I can make a choice. I can set my phone down and go outside, or I can do something different. So sometimes, again, we really have to take that initiative to define what choice am I making and is it the choice that I want to make.